Shields up, Iron Breakers. Murkan here coming at you with another video, and today we're going to be talking about Final Fantasy 16. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I've been hearing from a lot of people that they're not particularly happy with this particular entry into the franchise. They're saying that, you know, this is not a turn-based Final Fantasy, even though Final Fantasy 15 was also not turn-based. But then again, a lot of people also did not really like Final Fantasy 15, and I can't really blame them because the state in which Final Fantasy 15 released was less than optimal. Let's just put it at that. Even though I still enjoyed the experience overall, I can definitely see why people were not particularly happy about it. I think that nowadays, if you were to get like the Royal Edition of 15, it might actually be a reasonable experience. But 15 on release was far from perfect. And I actually think that is another one of the reasons why people are particularly hesitant to jump into Final Fantasy 16. It's like, hey, look, 15 was pretty bad, and I'm not, you know, super excited about jumping into 16 due to that. Now, when it comes to me, and I've said this multiple times, I'm a huge fan of another project that this team has worked on, which is Final Fantasy 14. As a matter of fact, I've said this also multiple times. The story of Final Fantasy 14 is the best story I've ever experienced in any form of media. And you know, I know that for a lot of people, that is something that they're not going to agree with, and that's fine. I'm talking about from my perspective, from my experience, and that is one of the reasons why I'm super excited about this. This team has made an MMO that has a fantastic story, and not just that, the gameplay of the MMO is also extremely fun, and therefore, you know, I've been wanting to play a single-player game from them for quite some time. So, with the release of this game, it's just perfect. Now, a lot of other people are also saying like, oh, this game has too much action. It almost looks like a Devil May Cry game. And to me, I look at that and I'm like, this just seems like a good thing. Devil May Cry is pretty cool. I like Devil May Cry. But I understand that that's not going to be the case for everyone. The way I look at it is that when it comes to turn-based games, that is stuff that you are going to be seeing from Square Enix now in the form of games like Octopath Traveler and, you know, those types of games. That is where you'll find those turn-based experiences. That's not to say that Final Fantasy 17, whenever that happens to come out, can't be turn-based. It might be turn-based. Who knows? This one is not going to be. It is what it is. Another complaint that I've actually also seen when I was playing through the demo, which you guys are seeing the footage of here. When I was playing through the demo, people were complaining that there were too many cutscenes. And I was thinking to myself, Final Fantasy has always had a lot of cutscenes. Am I wrong? I'm not the biggest Final Fantasy buff, but I'm pretty sure that Final Fantasy has also always had plenty of cutscenes. As a matter of fact, cutscenes in Final Fantasy, weren't they always like a big selling point? Am I wrong here? Let me know in the comment section down below. I'm actually curious because, you know, you see all of these criticisms of the game, and I'm not trying to, you know, tell people to change their minds about Final Fantasy 16. I'm just trying to make sure that we're all on the same page when it comes to this stuff, right? Because, like, look, I'm excited about this. Like I said, I will pretty much want to follow anything that this particular development team, Creative Business Unit 3, works on, but that might not be the case for everyone, which, again, is fine if that is the way that you want to approach it. But for me, from what I've played in the demo, I love the story of what was present in the demo. I love the gameplay. There are a couple of nitpicks that I would have, like I don't want motion blur, and that is something that they've already said they're going to be removing with the Day 1 patch, which was initially not really planned. There was not a Day 1 patch planned. The game is still playable without the Day 1 patch, but the Day 1 patch is going to be bringing in some quality of life stuff like some performance improvements. It is going to be bringing in also the ability to remove motion blur. I think there was also some mention of potentially more customization of controls, and, you know, they're going to be bringing in a lot of things. So to me, that's pretty much overall a good thing. Now, the thing that I really wanted to talk about in this video is also going to be a feature that is New Game Plus. Now, usually this is a feature that I tend to enjoy in a lot of games that I play, and this is one of those situations where it's like, is Final Fantasy 16 going to be a game that is one and done, or is it going to have some replayability? And a New Game Plus mode is something that usually incentivizes replayability, and IGN has an article where they go in depth into the Final Fantasy New Game Plus mode, and this is something that I would like to go over with you guys, and I'll tell you my opinions on the things that they're talking about here. June's IGN First is focused on Final Fantasy XVI, with less than a week until the game finally makes its way to PS5 on June 22nd. And by the way, I'm going to be streaming the whole thing here on the channel, so, if you're interested in watching a playthrough of this, make sure to subscribe, bell notification icon, all of that jazz, and thank you very much for doing that. Anyways, it is time for a Final Fantasy XVI exclusive. It might sound like we're getting ahead of ourselves. We asked the game developers to talk us through New Game Plus, where the higher difficulty Final Fantasy mode offers returning players a whole new challenge. So, for starters, the idea here is whenever you finish the game, you're going to be given access to New Game Plus mode, and that New Game Plus mode also gives you access to a new difficulty, which is called Final Fantasy mode. That's what they're talking about here. In our exclusive gameplay video, see above, director Hiroshi Takai and combat director Ryota Suzuki explain how the enemies you fight will change on your second playthrough. In your first playthrough, you can choose between the action-focused mode and the story-focused mode. So they're going to have two difficulties, which is normal mode and easy mode, with more story-focused. After you beat the game in either of these modes, New Game Plus unlocks, and you can carry protagonist Clive's level, gear, and abilities over to your next playthrough. New Game Plus also features a new mode called Final Fantasy Mode, which makes the game more challenging. This is something that I'm very curious about. Since you can continue your level and abilities from a previous playthrough in Final Fantasy Mode, enemies will become stronger accordingly. The positioning of enemies is different. And in many cases, the enemy type itself is entirely different as well. You might suddenly be confronted by an elite monster that wasn't there on your first playthrough. See, this is something that I think is really cool. Basically, you play through the game once, and then when you go through the second time around, you're going to be able to have a different experience because the mob configurations is going to be different. There might be new elite mobs in locations where they weren't there before. So you're going to be finding new surprises in this new difficulty mode, which I think is cool. In our video, you can see examples of how enemies change in the Great Wood stage near the beginning of the game, as well as the Inner Sanctum of Drake's Breath, a location you visit mid-game. These are not things that I've seen at all. As a matter of fact, when I've played through the demo, I actually didn't even go into the advanced combat thing because I don't want to experience anything past that beginning section because I want to jump into the game and experience all those things when the time is right. Anyway, while wolves await you on your first playthrough of the Great Wood and New Game Plus, minotaurs stand in your way. Fafnir, a boss you meet somewhere halfway through the stage, is now replaced by a chimera. One of the fiercer enemies you face at the Inner Sanctum of Drake's Breath during your first playthrough is a towering enemy that wields a heavy axe. Having to face two of these brutal enemies at the same time in New Game Plus would be one thing, but one of them is instead replaced by an Iron Giant, one of Final Fantasy's most iconic baddies, which made its first appearance in 1988's Final Fantasy II. Expect tons of surprises like that, but that wasn't there before, you might say to yourself, Takai says with a chuckle. Of course, a shuffled set of enemies is not the only way Final Fantasy XVI's New Game Plus shakes things up. You'll also become able to upgrade your weapons to a higher level. While on your first playthrough, weapons can only be upgraded to up to 3 degrees, New Game Plus allows the player to upgrade weapons up to 6 degrees. If you upgrade a weapon to the 6th degree, it will reach its maximum potential and will change to a different item name. New Game Plus, you can synthesize accessories as well, which according to Takai adds a whole new layer of customization. Cool, because I think they also talk about here how you have access to builds. As you'll be carrying over the items you obtained on your first playthrough, you'll be obtaining multiples of the same accessories. The blacksmith can synthesize these for you into one accessory with a +1 attribute, which makes it possible to create builds that match your playstyle even better. Builds. For example, let's say that a certain accessory allows you to shorten the recast time for abilities by 2 seconds. Cooldown reduction. By having 2 of these accessories synthesized into one, that becomes 4 seconds. Ooh, I can see this getting out of control into busted builds really, really fast. You can even go as far as separately equipping one more of these accessories, which would allow you to shorten the recast time up to 6 seconds. There's a wide variation of accessories that have different effects, and synthesizing them will allow for a new layer of depth in New Game Plus. In the game's arcade mode, you can replay stages you have finished before. Here you'll be scored according to how you perform in New Game Plus. A leaderboard, oh, there's even leaderboards, makes it possible to compete against players from around the world for the highest score. Arcade mode doesn't just let you replay stages, but adds your score to your performance. The score increases as you defeat enemies and use abilities. So, you know, the usual Devil May Cry type of stuff. Trying to get a higher score might feel a bit like how you would so in a classic shmup. After mid-boss, a results screen appears that evaluates your performance with a grade. Once you finish the stage, an additional results screen will indicate your score and grade for the entire stage, and you will receive a bonus according to your performance. Players who compete seriously in the leaderboards might rack up S-rank scores, but it will be interesting to see how far they can extend their score from there. As for why the main game doesn't show player scores and grades, Takai says that he didn't feel the need to evaluate the skill of players who are casually enjoying the game. I agree. I think it's nice that they put that in a separate mode. You know, that way you can just enjoy the gameplay your first time through, and then if you really want to get the, you know, all of that stuff, all of the high scores and whatnot, you can go ahead and do that in arcade mode. Above all, we wanted players to be able to enjoy the story without anything standing in the way. The same goes for the game's combat. I think many players don't want to be evaluated by the game. Yep. Takai tells us there's also a mode called Ultimaniac, which is even more difficult than Final Fantasy mode. For players who are up to the challenge, arcade mode offers a leaderboard for this difficulty as well. It's so difficult that I'm not even sure if I can beat the game on that difficulty myself, admits Takai, but if you're a diehard action game fan, it might be a welcome challenge. I don't think I'm going to be doing that. I think I'll stick to Final Fantasy mode, most likely. Besides arcade mode, Chronolith Battles, a sort of battle minigame, also come with a leaderboard in New Game Plus. In different areas of Valisthea, the realm where the game takes place, chronoliths are hidden, explains Takai. Once you have progressed to a certain point in the story, these standing stones will start to emit a blue light. By accessing them, you'll be challenged to a special battle, which we call Chronolith Trials. The main concept behind Final Fantasy XVI's combat is that the player can combine different icon abilities to create builds that match their own playstyles. However, for the Chronolith battles, we wanted to limit the player to certain icon abilities and test their skills in what plays out like a time attack. This is something that we've seen in plenty of games, like even recently in Jedi Survivor it has something kind of like this, which I forget the name, the Datacrons or whatever the hell it was. You'd find these rifts somewhere and you'd go there and then you'd have like a special battle that would take place. And, you know, there's plenty of games that do this kind of stuff. Even Bayonetta 2 did this. I haven't played Bayonetta 3, so I can't speak to that. But, yeah, these are things that a lot of these games have done. They talk about icon abilities here. I don't want to go too deep into icon abilities, but they say that by forcing the player to use a specific build, chronoliths might make you more comfortable with certain icon abilities you have ignored them until that point. That's actually a good point that they're making. And I believe, from what I can remember in the demo, you can freely respec whenever you want, which is super cool because that means there can be a lot of experimentation in terms of builds when it comes to Final Fantasy XVI, which again increases the replayability because maybe you'll play through it once and you did one build, or maybe you'll even just swap the build in between and your first playthrough is much more interesting, right? And then you go into New Game Plus and you can like min-max that build even further in Final Fantasy mode, and you can tackle even harder enemies that are going to be spawning, and the game itself is going to feel different because enemies are in different locations. He also says the time limit for these battles is 1 minute and 20 seconds. You have to defeat multiple waves of enemies within that time. That being said, by accomplishing various tasks, you can actually regain some of that time while fighting. Yep, this is something that we've seen. For example, one of those tasks might demand that you defeat an enemy by using a certain ability in the air. If you succeed, you'll get a few seconds back. This will become key if you want to beat the challenge before your time runs out. After a few waves, a boss designed specially for these challenges awaits you at the end. By defeating it within the time limit, you can obtain an accessory found only here. In New Game Plus, not only the difficulty but also the types of enemies you'll fight here changes, and there is a leaderboard as well. Since the Chronolith trials are essentially time attacks, Takai thinks that their speedy nature makes them a good starting point to join the leaderboards. Based on Takai's explanation, it seems that most of the features in New Game Plus are related to the game's combat. Takai believes that Final Fantasy XVI's combat is highly replayable. A wide variety of abilities in first playthrough client. Yeah, these are things that we already knew. In New Game Plus, we've also made it possible to skip the first part of the game in which Clive looks back at his childhood. Of course, all cutscenes can be skipped as well, so you can really focus on the combat. Final Fantasy XVI really has a lot of replayability, so for those looking for a new challenge, I hope you revisit the game after you roll the credits. Now, I'm curious to hear from you guys. How do you feel about this? Is this something that you're, is this something that you're interested in, doing New Game Plus and Final Fantasy mode, having the different locations of enemies and different enemies present in the game? Because to me, that is something that I find highly appealing. As a matter of fact, I don't know if you guys remember, Dark Souls 2 had something similar to this in New Game Plus, and it was the only Dark Souls that ever did this. And it's interesting because, it was not exactly different enemies. They revamped the enemies when they did Scholar of the First Sin, but like bosses would have red spirits that would join in and stuff like that. And that I felt was kind of cool. It was a feature that we could have potentially seen in other Souls games, I felt like, but we only really ever saw it on Dark Souls 2. Which, it just reinforced the thing, even though it was kind of like the black sheep of the Souls games, it was still a very good game. It's something that I've always said. Now, when it comes to 16, though, are you guys excited? Let me know in the comment section down below. Are you a part of the group that, you'd rather see it be a turn-based game, or you'd rather see it not be as action-oriented as it is? Because I believe that it was also Takai, director Hiroshi Takai. Okay, Ryota. I believe that Ryota Suzuki has also stated that he considers this to be his masterpiece. The combat in Final Fantasy 16 is like his masterpiece. So to me, it just seems like this game is going to be awesome, and the demo just kind of like reinforced that for me. If you guys at least tried the demo, if you have a PlayStation 5, I would recommend at the very least try the demo. Even if you're not super interested in it, it might change your mind. But anyway, that is going to be it for this video. If you enjoyed it, hit it up with a like. If you did not enjoy it, hit it up with a dislike. But most importantly, hit up the comment section. I'm very curious to know how you guys feel about the New Game Plus mode. It'll be interesting. Anyway, I'll see you guys on the next one. Subscribe, bell notification icon, all of that jazz. Stay strong, stay safe. Peace out.